What is going on, my friends? It's Kaylor here, and for most of my life, I was in a battle with my mind. I was tired, sick, anxious, and depressed. The only solution the system had for me was pills and some talk therapy. I knew in my heart there had to be more. So I studied human optimization obsessively, and I took massive action. Now, years later, I've created what can only be described as mental wealth. And now I've helped thousands of people from all around the world upgrade their mental health without drugs, just like I did. And that's exactly what this podcast is about. I interview people who can help us understand how to live a life beyond what we thought was possible. This is not your average mental health podcast, and it will challenge you to think differently. So sit back, open your mind, and get ready to learn how to create mental wealth in your life. Yo, my friends, what's up? What's good? What is going on? My name is Kaylor. Welcome to another edition of the Mental Wealth Podcast. And today, guys, we have just one of those episodes that's just an absolute fucking banger because we have an absolute legend on the podcast, someone who is just an absolute ninja and rock star in this industry. And when I say this industry, I just mean the personal growth space. He is a relationship specialist, but also just in the personal growth space, helping people expand their consciousness and helping people achieve their highest qualities of life. We have Stef Sifandos on the podcast today. I was fortunate enough to hang with him at a couple get-togethers here in Austin over the last couple of weeks. And he's just a great dude and just one of the best in this industry. I really look up to him. His content is just on fire. This guy really knows his stuff. He's got over 20 years of direct experience in the personal transformation space. Stefanos understands peak human potential. He is a trained educator and relationship expert with a background in behavioral science. He is passionate about leading people closer to their highest potential and to each other. Stefanos' philosophy merges the best of Eastern and Western methodologies and to promote spiritual balance and empower people in life and love. From trauma release to navigating at times murky waters of modern masculinity to helping women understand the men in their lives, he helps people escape negative patterns and cultivate a positive sense of self. Stefanos has also co-founded both World-Class Coaching and Education Institute and Global Men's Empowerment Movement and has been involved in multiple 8- and 9-figure startups. Stefanos has worked with thousands of men and women from all walks of life, special forces, soldiers, Olympic gold medalists, elite fighters, and everyday people have relied on him to restructure and reframe their relationships with themselves and their loved ones. Sometimes I just can't read for the life of me. But anyways, as you can see, very impressive bio. This guy has 20 years of experience. So this guy is no joke. And we cover a lot of ground. We start off by talking about his breakdown to breakthrough story, which is really interesting. We talk about masculinity and what it means to be healthy masculine. And we really actually get into a lot there. We talk about kind of what's going on in the world with conditioning men to be more feminine. And we then kind of talk a little bit about mother and father wounds and how those can manifest in a relationship, how to deal with disagreements, particularly in realms of COVID and everything that's going on politically, and how to deal with that in relationships. It's just a really good episode. This is an episode that just gets better as you listen to more of it. It just gets better and better as it goes on. We start off, I guess, a tad slow, but it just picks up more and more steam. He even walks me through a couple exercises during this episode, which I found really useful. And yeah, it's really cool, guys. You're going to enjoy this one. I'll shut up. Let's get into my very powerful episode with Stefanos Sifandos. Okay, my friends, I got to just interject for a hot second here before we get into the episode. I got to just ask, have you been getting value out of this podcast? Because if you think you've been getting value out of this podcast, just wait till you see and hear what we got going on at the Mental Wealth Academy. Some of you guys might not know this, but I've been a coach for years. I now have a team of coaches, and we facilitate a process and a journey for you to go out and build unshakable and bulletproof mental health, just like I did without pharmaceuticals. And yes, that's what we call mental wealth. I teach you all of the things you need to know and have that I did on my journey to get to the place that I am now at. And you do it all while being a part of a community of the most awake and aware people that you can engage and connect with. People are becoming best friends, and they're all on the same journey as you are. It's just absolutely incredible, honestly. And it's really easy and it's free to inquire on whether or not you are the right fit for the Mental Wealth Academy. Just go to buildmentalwealth.co. That's .co, and that's wealth, not health. So buildmentalwealth.co. The link is in the show notes. It's also in the link in my bio on Instagram. You'll go there. There's a little bit more information if you need, and you can sign up for a call where you will talk to either myself or one of my team members. You'll get a ton of value on that call, and you can take it and run if you want. Or if you're like most people, you're probably going to want to be a part of the Mental Wealth Academy by the end of it. And we can definitely talk about how to move forward. But guys, what have you got to lose? Nothing. It's free. It's easy to sign up. Come chat with us. Let's see if this just might change everything for you, because coaching did for me. And I want to provide that same opportunity for you. So go to buildmentalwealth.co, sign up today. Can't wait to see you in there, and we'll talk to you soon. All right, Stef, my man, I've been very excited for you to come on. Welcome to the Mental Wealth Podcast.
Yeah, it's good to be here, man. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so here's where I want to start. This is typically where I start with our guests. I mean, you're obviously very passionate about helping people achieve higher qualities of life, particularly in the realms of their relationships. But I want to know about your story. And I kind of have a theory that people in our space often have to go through breakdowns to go through breakthroughs, or a breakdown to go through a breakthrough. Do you want to share a little bit about your story in terms of, did you have breakdowns that led you to breakthroughs, or was it a actual aha breakdown moment that led you on this path?
Yeah, I think for most of us, man, I think the state of collective consciousness, we have to experience rock bottom and breakdowns in order to traverse a new path and eventually be a different person to what we've been, and change our patterns that are associated, our beliefs, our patterns, our internal frames of reference that are associated with that old path. And so for me, that was no different. I did have to, that was my journey. I had to hit rock bottom multiple times. I had to have multiple breakdowns in order to make very substantial changes in my life. And, you know, the catalyst for that was relationship. Two catalysts actually were relationships. And it wasn't the oh, woe is me, this relationship's gone. It was more what the breakup process revealed about me and what it unpacked and revealed within me as well, in terms of, you know, suppressed and repressed trauma that was just really stuck there. And so that has been a very big part of my journey. And then everything that was associated with my behavior in those relationships, and in all of my relationships, really my adult relationships, where there was at least the majority of them, infidelity, dishonesty, you know, abrasiveness, shut down, just really just being who my, you know, being and seeing what I grew up with and playing that out in relationship, and being, honestly, just being really, really ignorant to that pain.
And what was the turning point? Like, it's really interesting to me, Stef. I mean, you talk a lot about, as do I, about how, you know, our conditioning and our environments and through our experiences and our upbringing, and when we eventually, as we all do, have wounding in that conditioning, that then kind of makes us go on hyper alert, and our subconscious protects us in all ways to not be exposed or be vulnerable to opening up that wound ever again. So then we have these wounds, we have these unmet needs as well too from our upbringing that then show up in our adult relationships and have, manifest as us having difficulties with intimacy or whatever else in our relationships. But like, why do some people like you wake up to that and look at that as an opportunity to learn more about yourself and then take personal responsibility to change that to then become even better? But then some people stay stuck in that, and then they reach for the bottle, or they reach for the food, or they, like what was the difference between your story and maybe someone who doesn't wake up?
Yeah, there are a few different responses, I think, to that. And they all reside in the realm of paradox. And so one of them is the pain of one's current circumstances needs to be greater than the pain of change. And most people won't change because the perception of changing is too painful, and they'd rather just stay with what's familiar because there's a sense of safety that's associated with that and comfort. The other response to that is I have no fucking idea why some people will leap in and lean in and jump in the dark ocean and the realm of their own unconscious self and be fully committed to change no matter what. And I was one of those people. I literally sat down with myself and I said out loud, I'm either going to end up in a mental asylum, I'm going to commit suicide, or I'm going to move through this. And either way, I will not stop until I have created substantial change in my life, and I will know when that is.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Did you play sports growing up? I can only assume you do. You look like an athletic dude.
That's an interesting story. I was quite overweight growing up.
Oh, really?
And and sports were really difficult for me. Physical activity was really difficult for me. I did play sports. I played basketball. I played soccer. I played AFL, Aussie Rules football. I played sports growing up, but I was just never any good. And I wasn't athletic. And it wasn't until I was about probably 16, I started losing a lot of weight, 15, 16, started losing a lot of weight and started becoming more athletic. And yes, at that age, I started going to the gym and taking my sports more seriously. So it wasn't one of those, I was from a little kid, I was super athletic and super into everything. Unfortunately not. But as a teenager, late teens, I got into all of that. And yes, I train every day. I move my body every day. I'm very committed to physical health and wellness and physical adeptness. Yeah.
Yeah. Because the reason why I ask is, there's parallels in our story. Like I had a lot of wounding, and same thing. It manifested in my relationship. I had addictive tendencies, dependency on a lot of things, unhealthy coping mechanisms and patterns. And I always actually attribute the way in which I got out of that or looked at it as an opportunity, that it was happening for me and that I wasn't going to fucking, accept any sort of anything less than getting out of it and getting past it and healing and creating excellence, I guess, was sports. I always talk about that because my coaches and just the conditioning that I was exposed, or the things I was exposed to in sports that then conditioned me, is it was so ingrained inside of me that not to give up, and that failure is actually a good thing. And that on the other side of that is an opportunity, and how to win, how to lose, how to be disciplined, how to win. Right. And ultimately, and that's, I think, what really helped me, get out of those things, as we kind of, talk about, the difference between some people who just don't get out of it, and some people go down the wrong path, and some people actually use it for a beautiful thing. So it's just really interesting in that way. I want to talk a little bit about why men generally, and this is generalization, but why do men generally suck at emotional intelligence? Why do men have such a hard time in general? Like even talk it, like I already can hear people, and anytime two men like us get together and, we got the tattoos and we got the muscles and stuff, I already hear people saying like, man, it's just so rare that two men can sit here and talk about consciousness and emotions and conditioning and all that stuff. Why do men generally really suck at this?
That's a good question. I'll come back to that in a second. I just want to tie a bow on something you said, because when you were speaking about sports and achievement and just your previous experience with that, something activated in me. And so about 10 years ago, when it wasn't my first massive breakdown, but it was the breakdown that really propelled me into the next evolution of my life in more meaningful, very clear, delineated ways. And during that time where I wanted to kill myself multiple times and the thought of suicide was very prevalent in my being, I would lean on and I would lean into some of the really hard shit I did. I was a competitive athlete in different sports as a young adult, and I trained really, really hard. One of the reasons I trained really, really hard is, again, my addictive tendencies to the adrenaline and to the hormonal release that came with that exercise, and the achievement as well, like to be crowned, with the achievement, the validation externally to me. But I trained a lot to forget my pain, to numb, right? And as a result of that, I really pushed my body. I'm very blessed that my body is very intact. I've got a knee injury now, but other than that, that's healing and I'm fine. But I really, really pushed my body. And in those times of emotional despair where I wanted to give up and I wanted to kill myself and I wanted to end it, or I wanted to just go back to my old ways, I remembered, not only in my mind, but in my body, some of the really fucking hard physical shit I did and how I got through that. And if I could get through that, surely I could get through this. And so I just wanted to just really honor, validate, and reinforce the truth that you just shared about that, which around the previous question, like why do some people do and some people don't? Because if we have experiences and we've internalized those experiences, that we make sense of them, that we've done really difficult things in our lives, we've experienced difficult things, and we can reference in the moment of despair that we've done something really difficult as a reference point. Maybe I got through that. Maybe I could get through this. That's, I think, another contributing factor to why some people do and some people don't. Breakdown, breakthrough, etc. I just wanted to touch on that.
Yeah, 100%. And I think you bring up two things come up for me in that seemingly these quote unquote healthy ways of coping, such as working out, eating healthy, dieting, can be taken too far. I mean, there really is a way. Yeah, because it actually is feeding the same monster, right? It's like, it's the validation, like you said, getting crowned of, with achievement and, the way in which I get, so it used to be, the way in which I feel worthy or whatever, or to get love, care, and attention is to light up the pleasure centers of my brain by drinking alcohol. And then I'm the life of the party. And everyone says, you're such a fun time to be around. And then I just went in the opposite direction as well, too, as you said, in that then I just got addicted to working out. And then I took way too many steroids and I worked out to a point where it actually was hurting me physiologically and psychologically. And, I got into extreme dieting and, it just went the other way. And then I started to get attention from women. So then I used sex as a coping mechanism. So, I mean, you got to find a healthy relationship and approach and intention towards those things. And then I love what you said about, it really was that for me. It's that I had been through so many breakdowns through sports that I just inevitably saw parallels between what I was dealing with in my life and the difficulties there, and some of those examples of difficult times of when I lost in sports, or when I felt really insecure in sports, or when I had to overcome some sort of, really intense challenge, right? And I think those are two really good points. Now back to my question about why men suck in general at these kind of conversations.
Yeah, we're not taught how to emote. Our society generally shuns emotional expression in men. It in a very confusing way, it gives us permission to be angry, but only in certain spaces. And so anger is often the only emotion that we can associate with, that we're somewhat allowed to express, but not allowed to express. And it's very confusing. So young boys, even just in the language of, big boys don't cry. And the reality is we have a limbic system. We emote, we feel emotions like any other human does. And the appropriate expression of emotions is not really taught. And so men will go, one of two ways. Maybe one of three ways. They'll either be very overt and aggressive in the world because they want to actually express and they don't know how. And so they want to overpower everything and everyone in their environment. And they become subjugating, controlling, oppressive, etc. Or they really withdraw, and they withdraw their emotional selves and they become very passive and meek, and they lose themselves and they lose their value in any relationship dynamic, whatever that may be. And they maximize others and they minimize themselves. and they develop frustration around that and all these internalized emotions that they don't know how to be with. And so they then numb, video games, excessive work, making money, eating food, TV, binging. None of these are, except for shooting heroin every day, I guess. But, drugs and alcohol per se, like the watching TV is not a bad thing. But if you're using it as a crux and you're binging on it, it becomes unhealthy, it becomes something that is codependent, right? There are certain things and certain practices that are unsustainable. Like, again, having cocaine every day or marijuana or drugs, external substances that alter our consciousness and pull us away from actually feeling and numb us, that is unsustainable physiologically. Like, you could watch TV all day, every day, I would think, for a long time, and I wouldn't think you'd develop cancer from it, or your body wouldn't break down, your organs wouldn't fucking shut down, right? You shoot heroin every day, you're going to encounter some issues. And so we're not taught how to emote, number one, by culture and in our family dynamics. It's not really accepted that we emote. And then as adults, it's where it's reinforced to not continue that emotional expression. And so because we don't know how to do it, we feel shame about it, because in a man's physiology, when he is of utility, of usefulness in his tribe, and when he is able to contribute in meaningful ways, his self-esteem is increased. If his partner or society is asking him, but has never taught him and never given him permission, but now is asking him, oh, you need to be more emotional, you need to carry greater emotional intelligence, and he's unsure of how to do it, he doesn't know how to do it, he feels unworthy, he feels less than, he then will mask that or compensate in non-endearing ways and in often dangerous ways that create more distance and isolation in relationship.
So then let's talk about the murky waters of modern masculinity. Let's talk about, what does it mean to be a man? And this may be, Stef, the most important topic, I think, and I believe personally, that we could talk about, because I think that, I'm taking that phrase from your bio, the murky waters of modern masculinity. And when I read that, I said that hits the nail on the head. I don't think a lot of people really know what it means. There's all this talk about toxic masculinity. And then I believe that masculinity is under attack and that we're being conditioned, whether it be by the government or corporations or media, marketing, Hollywood. I think I notice certainly the conditioning that if we are embracing masculine tendencies and traits, that somehow is toxic. So let's just start with, like, to you, what's your best description of what it means to be healthy, masculine, dominant?
Yeah. The answer is, it's different for every man. And it's actually for every man to determine that for themselves. That's my immediate response. And I really pull from Jack Donovan's work on this. I think we're asking two questions. What does it mean to be a good man? And what does it mean to be good at being a man? And the two are very different questions. And the latter is more rooted in biology. And there are 4 tactical virtues that Jack Donovan applies to what does it mean to be good at being a man. And they are, again, rooted in our upbringing from, over millions of years of evolution, from hominoids to Homo sapiens to, where we are today. And how we were, again, what I mentioned earlier, how our self-worth and self-esteem and identity was defined in group dynamics, in our communities, and the roles that we played. And that defines, to some extent, the rules of tribe and the rules of culture and the rules. Well, when I say the rules of culture, I'm talking about tribal culture, so to speak. And that, he speaks a lot to the culture of gangs as well, and how gangs have been formed, and not in the sense that looking at gangs as a derogatory framework for groups of people getting together and inflicting violence on other people, though that has been traditionally part of it, but more so how we interact with each other, right? So I think the more important question to ask is, what does it mean to be good at being a man? And so some of those principles are strength. Strength is one of them, right? So we look at strength. Okay, well, it pays for us to be physically strong in our bodies, to be adept in our bodies. Doesn't mean you have to have the strongest deadlift in the room or be the strongest person in the world. It means you have to have confidence in your physical body. That transcends and translates to relational dynamics as well. When a woman, in polarity dynamics, and we're talking about just opposite sex fertilization-driven sex dynamics, right? When a woman sees a man that is adept in his body and confident in his body and in his physical prowess and structure, there's an attraction that immediately takes place, especially if the other values are aligned as well. Like her history says that, oh, I find this man attractive as well. The attribute of physical prowess is very attractive. Increases polarity dynamics, right? Increases our chances of mating and getting together and bonding and so forth. Strength is one of them. Honor is another one that he speaks to as well. And so I'm going to just give these two examples. And I added one to that, and I'll share that one as well. But honor is one that he speaks to, and very specifically to utility. So when you have a role in your community, when you have a role in your tribe, in your family, and you play that role in excellence, the best of your ability, you're in honor. You are contributing to the longevity and the increase of value of that community. That's where you feel a sense of honor. Because the mastery that you have, and mastery is another one, but the mastery that you have in the skills that you bring, and when you execute those in excellence, you're in honor. And that says a lot for who we are, again, for our self-esteem and self-worth, not just for men, for human beings, full stop. One that I added in there, another tactical virtue is connectivity and intimacy, basically, and how we bond and form relationships, and how we connect and see each other and feel each other and hold each other as man to man, man to women, women to women. It's irrelevant. Just as people, right? That plays a big part. If we're able to do that in meaningful ways, and I call this selfish selflessness, where we're prioritizing ourselves. Some call it enlightened self-interest. And when we're also able to simultaneously prioritize the needs of others and find a harmony in that, and play with that, which is very difficult to do, by the way, because sometimes those values and those needs are conflicting, but how we manage that really matters, and how we repair that really matters. And so that contributes to being good at being a man as well, more so being good at being human, right? Is how we communicate with each other. So I think going there, and let me give one more example that may add some context to what you're speaking to, because when we say, what does it mean to be a good man? My definition and your definition could be completely different. Right. And let me give you an extreme example to exemplify this. So just take someone that's a suicide bomber, right? That suicide bomber goes and does the thing that a suicide bomber does. Let's assume that person's a man. The community that he has done that to, that he has gone and exploded himself and has killed 20 people, let's just say, the people in that culture and the family members of the people that have been killed are looking at that man, and they're not saying that he's a good man. They're not saying that he's honorable. They're saying that he's dishonorable. They're saying that he's evil. They're giving him all negative adjectives to describe him, right? The person that the suicide bomber, the culture that he came from, the place that he came from, his in-group, because we're talking in-group, out-group dynamics, his in-group is saying he's an honorable man. He did the right thing. He's got our best interests at heart. He's waving the flag of our mission. He's a good man. Same fucking thing, completely different vantage point. So I'm not going to sit here and say, this is what it means to be a good man. If you're not doing this, you're not a good man. I think men know how to be good men. They need to figure it out themselves. That's part of being a fucking good man.
That's all fascinating. So then, what would you say, Stef, to a woman who hears that and says, well, those are all traits that I believe a woman should embrace as well too?
Great. Embrace them then.
Okay.
Yeah. Like there's no wrong here. Embrace it. And if you're living your life in alignment, that's for you. That works for you then.
So, but okay, so this is good stuff.
I want to add something to that though. Let me go back to the strength piece, right? Traditionally, I don't mean traditionally in the 1950s. I'm talking about over hundreds of thousands of years, millions of years. Who has been responsible for extending the perimeter? Who has been responsible for hunting big game? Who has been responsible for carrying heavy loads? Who has the larger body frame? This isn't a judgment. There's no, like, generally speaking, there are women that are bigger, stronger, and tougher than me. Sure, 100%. But who is generally bigger? Who has been responsible for more feats of strength and building structures and like shit like men have? And so it's more natural for men, or more needed back then for men to be stronger. What I'm saying is that from an evolutionary perspective, we still carry many of our mating strategies from when they were formed in early days to how they are formed now, and to how we perceive ourselves now and how we mate, interact, and attract each other. And that's still very valid. You know, we cannot completely disregard our biology, just like we cannot completely disregard our culture and the culture of today either. And we've also evolved massively from millions of years ago. Our consciousness, our ability to expand our past, present, and future, the development of our prefrontal cortex, language, the eating meat, the development of technologies that have risen, the fact that we've found, sacred plant medicines along our journey at some point, which has expanded our ability to think and feel. We're very different to who we were, but there are some fundamental truths and aspects of self that are still applicable to who we are today. And it's okay to be different.
All right, my friends, I want to just interrupt for a quick, hot little second here. First off, if you don't subscribe or follow this podcast, do it right now, right? We have some unbelievable guests coming up. The guests just keep getting better and better and better, and you don't want to miss out on those. And if you don't subscribe and follow, you probably will. Okay. Next, a little favor. If you've been enjoying this podcast, if you're actually getting a lot of value out of this podcast, we would really appreciate it. It would mean the world to us. In fact, truly, if you were to just write us a review, give us 5 stars if you think we're deserving of it, because we're trying to climb the charts and get to the top of the categories that we're in. Health and wellness, mental health, because that helps us execute our mission and get more mental wealth and spread the word and the messages that we have in these podcasts. And that's what these platforms look at to get us at the top of those categories. So it takes under 2 minutes, take the 1 to 2 minutes that it takes, write us a review. I read all of them. I appreciate the hell out of them. And that would be amazing. Now, lastly, take a screenshot. If you're enjoying this episode, take a screenshot of it right now. Write a little something on your Instagram story. Tag me at the Kaylor Betts on Instagram. Look at the handle of the guest in the show notes that we have on today and tag them as well too. Most of our guests have really big followings, right? So a lot of people will see it if they reshare it. And I promise you, if I see yours, I will reshare it as well. Okay. Back to the show. Yeah. Okay. So that's what I want to jam on a little bit. We don't shy away from the difficult conversations here, the difficult questions. I mean, when I like the reframe in terms of it's a better question to say, what is it to you to be a good man? But and I want to kind of get into maybe the polarity now, masculine, feminine polarity. I know for me, that's when I feel the most connective and the most in my element, and quite honestly, the most turned on in my relationships is when there is that masculine, feminine polarity. But I also want to talk about and you just alluded to it. We cannot deny our biology. We cannot deny what is ancestrally consistent and, potentially up to a couple million years of evolution that has now brought us to be completely different in many ways. Every cell in our body either has a masculine, if we're a man, component to it, with minor exceptions, maybe with hermaphrodites or whatever. And then, every cell in a woman's body is different because they're a woman. But let's talk a little bit about, you mentioned it's okay to be different. I mean, look, we can't deny right now that there is a progressive movement out there to kind of I guess dismantle masculine and feminine polarity, maybe dismantle the nuclear family, dismantle what it means to be masculine and what it means so maybe pulling men to be more feminine and women to be more masculine. You mentioned it's okay to be different. So what would you say to someone who says, well, what about, isn't it okay to be feminine dominant if I'm a man? Or are you suggesting that would not really
that's fine.
Equate to their highest quality of life? Okay.
No, that's fine.
Now, what about in relationships? Because you work with people in relationships. So are you suggesting that there doesn't always need to be masculine and feminine polarity or any polarity at all?
No, there needs to be masculine and feminine polarity, and there needs to be polarity for attraction to remain. However, how that polarity presents itself in each biological human can differ. And it really depends on the individual. So you can have a biological man embody more dominant feminine traits if that feels natural to him. Natural meaning that feels it's in alignment with him. That's who he wants to be. He's not coming from a place of shadow or compensation or trauma. It's not trauma informed. It's actually a healthy decision based on who he is. Vice versa for women. There's nothing intrinsically wrong with that at all. And it's completely up to the individuals to figure that out for themselves and for the coupledom to figure that out. But there needs to be polarity for them to attract. And so, and those roles will shift, just like leadership shifts in a relationship as well. It's not always going to be, this person has a dominant masculine energetic, they're always going to be in the masculine frame of being. No, not at all. They're going to oscillate. It's just that that's where that couple naturally dances better when that individual is more in their masculine and that individual is more in their feminine. But that's an individual choice they have to make and a choice they make as a couple.
So you mentioned a word that I think is really pertinent there. You said naturally. Do you feel that society is, I mean, it's actually easier to look at it on the feminine side. I feel as though I see a lot of women who are being conditioned by society to be a fucking boss bitch and a boss babe and push and work and, you know, be the CEO of your own business and then expect to do everything else, to also be a mother and be nurturing in the relationship and come home and be able to take care of, you know, the kids and be emotionally available and emotionally intelligent and switch that off. And that's a really hard thing to do. Like, you mentioned naturally. That's what I want to point out. Like, do you feel though that there's a lot of men who would be greatly served if they learned this kind of stuff, if they were taught and educated on how to embrace their masculinity, but yet they're being conditioned to actually be ashamed of their masculine traits, and then vice versa with the feminine?
Yes. So naturally, in reference to subjectivity, not objectivity, naturally not meaning something that's objective and a hard truth, and there's nothing else that deviates from that, naturally to that individual, so subjective. To answer the second part of your question, yes, I do believe that it would serve men to learn to be more in their healthy masculine expression, because that will actually give them access to the feminine aspect of self as well. And they'll be able to dance with an individual that requires them to be in their feminine at certain times. Now, it's similarly, though, it's very true for men that are being asked to be in their masculine posture and then all of a sudden be in their feminine energetic of emotional relating and intimacy and so forth. So we're putting all this pressure on ourselves. At the end of the day, we're robust human beings and we have access to both energetics. They are within us. We are 100% masculine, 100% feminine. It exists within us, right? What you want to play out that's quote unquote natural to you. And I would say as well, let me just go on the record here too, that, and this is a product of so many inputs, that the majority of men in the world are going to be more comfortable in their masculine energetic. And the majority of women in the world are going to be more comfortable in their feminine energetic. It's not a judgment. It's not right or wrong. One's not better than the other, right? But that's not applicable to every single person. It really isn't. And so we have to take that into account. And so when you're entering relationship, knowing what is really valid and applicable to you is super, super helpful. I receive comments often, well, not often, but occasionally about, let me actually go back. What I think we're doing in society is we're attempting to homogenize each other and our humanity, because we're so scared of difference, because we've demonized difference in all areas of our existence, not just in our gender dynamics. And because of that, we're trying to make everything fit in one mold. I don't think that works. And I think we need to practice being a little less scared of difference.
Yeah, one of my favorite quotes is, it's often best to avoid extreme ideologies. And I think I find it to be a very extreme ideology to say that every man on earth should be masculine dominant, or and that should all look the same, and every female should be, and the nuclear family should always look the same. I agree with you. And I think you put it very nicely. It's like most men will be benefited or will be in alignment with what their highest purpose is or quality of life if they embrace their healthy masculine. But the key word there is most. There's always room. I mean, it's very nuanced. It's very complex. And I think it is very extreme to assume otherwise. But I think that it's just, again, we're very conditioned by media and Hollywood and corporations. And I do find that, like you said, we're trying to get everyone on the same page, and we're not leaving room for what it means to be human. God forbid we allow for the complexities of what it means to be human, which is we are different vastly, and we have to be more accepting of that. So I thought that was, really well hit. Gosh, where do we go next? I mean, maybe let's go to masculine, or let's continue down the masculine feminine polarity. And you talk a lot about wounds, mother and father wounds. I think that would be a great place to go next. I've noticed you've been speaking about it a lot lately. You probably have for a long time. I like to be practical and really tactical, because that's what I think podcasts are really for. Like I love listening to a podcast and just being able to take one thing out of a podcast and being like, this is an actionable takeaway that I can literally start tomorrow implementing in my life to just be better. What are some, when it comes to the wounding, maybe let's stick with mother and father wounds, like maybe explain a little bit if people don't know what those really are. And then what's the practical and tactical first step you can do if you see those coming up and manifesting in your relationships?
Yes, a mother and father wound is not a formal diagnosis or not a formal psychological diagnosis. It's a way to, such as BPD or NPD or something like that. We don't have a formal diagnosis of, you have a mother wound, therefore take this medication. It's not so much like that. So it's more a way to understand how we are creating and attracting certain patterns and relationships in our lives, and the potential core infliction of where those patterns are coming from, the birth of those patterns, right? And it's usually in reference to the relationship to the mother or the relationship to the father, or both, right? And so an example of that is if you have a father wound, it could be akin to an abandonment wound. It can also be known as an abandonment wound, where your father wasn't present. He didn't provide structure in your life. He didn't provide discipline in your life, healthy discipline, by the way. He didn't provide boundaries and borders for you. He was just unavailable, not around, emotionally distant. And that, as an adult, then causes you to not trust individuals. You think they're going to leave you, abandon you. They can't be relied upon. Whether you're a man or a woman is irrelevant. You can't forge, particularly as a man, you can't forge male friendships. It's really difficult to do so. Some examples, right? And so I'll stay on that thread for a moment. I'll keep pulling that thread. And so a tangible thing that you can do as a man in that instance is join a men's group. There are many around. I have one, Empowered Brotherhood. There's Sacred Sons. There's Mankind Project. The list goes on and on. There are so many excellent Rising Man. There are so many excellent men's movements that are providing community-based support for men to learn how to trust again and heal that wound of abandonment, as an example, right? The mother wound. This one is a little more tricky as well. And so one example of the mother wound could be that your mother wasn't nurturing with you and for you. She didn't care for your heart. She didn't teach you or give you permission to be in your emotional expressive self, right? As an adult, that can cause again, the trust piece is big, man, not trusting women, whether you're a man or a woman. So for a woman, it's that sister wound, not being able to get close, not knowing how to be intimate, not knowing how to emotionally regulate oneself, not knowing how to give and receive love, even accept compliments. So low self-worth comes really low. Self-esteem drops a great deal. And something that you can do as an adult, if you have that mother wound, and I would, very, very strongly suggest this, is spend time with a coach, a therapist, someone that can help you emotionally regulate and touch those emotions that have been suppressed and repressed. If you don't want to work with someone, you can start to engage in breath work or somatic work, something that can help release the unconscious pressure that you've been feeling for a very long time around emotional expression.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Let's talk about, you mentioned the term somatic. I know that is work that you've gotten into, somatic release type modalities. Can you talk a little bit about how we often approach trauma, wounding with cognitive therapies or strategies, which I think obviously have their place and their use. They're useful, they serve us, and it's a part of the process or a piece to the puzzle, we could say. Talk to us a little bit about how much of this is like stored really in our body, and where the first kind of steps are to that healing process and those modalities?
Yeah. For me, somatic work has, I want to say it's been potentially a final puzzle piece, because there's nothing wrong with cognitive therapies. CBT is an example, talk therapy. There's nothing wrong with that. And it actually has value in a place in certain sequence. And so the final puzzle piece for me is that we store so many of our experiences, not only cognitively and in the physiology of our brain, but we store them in our bodies as well. And when we experience trauma or a very intense experience, like a car accident or sexual abuse or just ongoing violence in the household, whatever it may be, we store that in our nervous system in terms of how our nervous system responds. And usually it responds in a sympathetic, activated state. If we only talk through that previous pain that we experienced, and we do that too early in a way that isn't sequential, that pain is still stuck in our bodies and we need to release it somehow. So we release it through breath, sound, and or movement. And those three modalities, if you like, combined in very specific ways, helps us close the loop on trauma and helps us learn to re-regulate our nervous systems in a proactive, deliberate way. And that's where real healing takes place, because if we cannot regulate our nervous systems and we cannot regulate in the presence of others that are safe as well, and that's how we learn actually to do it, in the presence of safe others, then we'll never actually change the stories and we'll never actually really heal if we can't regulate. So we have to be in a regulated state before we can start to explore the quote unquote trauma that we've experienced.
So first steps to someone who's intrigued by somatic work: find a coach, work
with a practitioner for sure.
Work with a practitioner. Yeah. Okay.
If you go to Somatic Experiencing website, as this is just one example of many, right? They have practitioners all over the world, actually.
Okay, cool. Stef, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask a question that I think is really pertinent to my audience. One of the most common questions I get, and just to give you a little bit of a background of my audience, I speak out about some of the things that have gone on in the last few years with COVID and, restrictions, mandates, and whatnot. And a lot of my audience are people who would consider themselves awake and aware of a lot of the things going on in the background with COVID and everything like that. But one of the most popular questions I get is, hey, me and my partner are not on the same page. We've had this marriage, this relationship for quite a few years, and we seem to really be in alignment. And then all of a sudden COVID hits, and now we're on a different page in terms of the vaccine, in terms of restrictions, how it was handled, how we should be living our lives, during COVID, post-COVID. And we're starting to see that maybe there is some unalignment. So just, can you speak to differences in beliefs in a relationship? Is it possible to have a healthy relationship when you're on two different pages about, things going on in the world?
Depends on so many variables. Depends on the nature of the beliefs and if they're non-negotiable beliefs. So if you have a belief and you have a wound around your belief as well, or a deep attachment or addiction to your belief because it defines you so much, or you're just very loaded and charged around your belief and your partner's is opposite to that, you're going to struggle to be together if it's a non-negotiable. If it's not a non-negotiable belief system that you're holding and it's opposing each other, you can talk through it, you can work through it, you can be with it, right? You can set boundaries and agreements in how you communicate about that belief or that subject matter and so forth. But I'll be quite frank and upfront with you. If my wife's, that's actually interesting. I was about to retract what I was going to say, because it's not completely true. This is interesting. Actually, this is really interesting. Let me say what I was going to say, and then so with respect to COVID, just using that as an example, right? I have a sense that you and I are on the same page, right? If my wife held an opposing view to that and she was panicked and feared and needs to get vaccinated, needs to do all those things, and what I was going to say was, man, I don't know if we would be able to be together, but that's not true. That's not true, because I want to respect her sovereignty as well. I think what happens is I talk this through and move this through, and not only respect her sovereignty, still be a stand for what I believe in as well, and what my values and principles are. but also, love the parts of her that are also in concern and worry. Now, if her behavior and or my behavior is negatively impacting me and I'm allowing it to negatively impact me and I can't shift and move her out of that, then we're not going to be able to be together. Right. And so there are, of course, there are exceptions and there are non-negotiables. And when there are non-negotiables, they really have to be non-negotiables. Otherwise, you're going to compromise your values and you're going to compromise your principles.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is you're saying that the value and the principle that you have of sovereignty, personal sovereignty, is a stronger force, or you put more weight or priority into that than the belief of, not getting vaccinated or not succumbing to the fear or whatever it is with COVID. Is that a fair assessment, that it's more based on values over beliefs?
Yeah, that would be a fair assessment. Yeah.
Okay. And what you're saying is that, because I want to really be clear about, you're talking about non-negotiables. I would assume, but I don't want to assume anything, but I want to bring it up and ask, are you suggesting that it's for each individual to come up with what is a non-negotiable for me, and then what you should really maybe make the basis though of what a non-negotiable is for you is like your relationship to that belief? Like, is it based and rooted in wounding and like things that could easily trigger you, because that's probably not going to work? Or is this just something that you just believe and it's like, yeah, but like I could compromise, and if I was with someone that, didn't believe this, that would be something we could set boundaries around?
Yeah. So here's one for you. I'm going to ask you a question. So are you in a relationship at the moment?
So, yeah, I do. Yeah.
You're in a relationship. Okay. Do you have any non-negotiables in your relationship?
Yeah. I mean, I got a lot.
Oh, well, give me one.
I want to give you a good one. I mean, I'll just say the one that comes up first, which is they must very much value their physiological health and take care of themselves.
Okay. And do you have defined parameters of what that looks like?
Yeah. Yeah.
So if your partner started breaking those parameters and started not looking after her health, whatever that looked like, I don't know what it would look like. It could be binge watching TV. It could be, because that's part of it, right? Like
eating too much highly processed food too often. Yeah.
Yeah. Smoking.
Yeah.
I don't know, smoking cigarettes.
Yeah.
Which I find it interesting that people in Western society still do. Anyway, it's another conversation. Now, if she started doing that and you started noticing this, would you say, hey, if you don't stop that, we're breaking up?
I mean, yeah, it would be said in a different way, communicated differently. But yeah, essentially that would be my message.
Would you not want to be first curious about where it's coming from and how you can support her and what that would look like to make those changes? And is that value still important to her?
Yeah. So let me actually say something quickly. So I talk about cancel culture should be curious culture. So that just what came up for me in terms of like, before we cancel people, let's get curious about where is this actually coming from? Let's learn more about where they're coming from. And I would actually have more concern and curiosity before canceling, but I won't deny that if that habit didn't change ultimately, that wouldn't work for me.
And that's okay. And this is my exact point though with the non-negotiables. Non-negotiables are not cut and dry, hard and fast and immediate. They are guidelines for us. And so if you carry compassion and empathy and you see the value in the partnership and in that person, and of course, if their maladaptive behavior is continuous and ongoing, it's not going to serve you. And that is a non-negotiable. And that's where you say, look, I've done my best in this. I don't see you trying. I mean, it's a hypothetical situation. I don't see you making the changes you need to. You're on a self-destructive path. And as much as I love you, I can't be with that. I'm only enabling that. I'm out. My non-negotiable. But I just want to be clear when we hear the word non-negotiable, what it actually means, the term non-negotiable, what it actually means. And it's not necessarily this hard and fast. I really love what you said. It's get curious before you cancel. got to get curious. But in order to get genuinely curious, here's the interesting thing. We've got to feel safe in our nervous system. We actually physiologically need to be regulated. Curiosity doesn't exist when regulation in the nervous system isn't abound. So that means you've got to do your inner work. So you can't get triggered by the shit that your partner's doing that isn't non-negotiable for you. Because if you start getting triggered and threatened and go, oh, our relationship's going to break up, she's going to get fat, sex isn't going to be good, all the things, oh, I'm going to be embarrassed, whatever stories you're telling yourself, and you start getting triggered and then you defend and you respond or you react based on those triggers, you're not getting curious.
Yeah.
And therefore the non-negotiable almost becomes a shadow expression of self.
Right. I mean, can't we get triggered, but then pause, get present, maybe take some time, do our breath work, do our emotional regulation.
You can't act on the trigger though. Like if you act on the trigger and project, then the triggers, there's a follow through on that. Of course you can get triggered. Of course you can get activated. Fuck yeah.
Yeah.
You should.
Yeah. Because when we're hijacked by our emotions, we don't have the ability to have a logical conversation, which this conversation needs some logic aspects.
Some element of logic, and it needs some element of healthy emotional interchange and compassion as well. Yeah, for sure.
Oh, Stef, man, that's really good stuff. Thank you for what you brought today. I want to ask just the last question. If people could just leave with one, like I said, this one actionable takeaway, this one thing that we can take away from a podcast that we can implement in our lives to increase our highest quality of lives and relationships, what's the one thing you would say?
I'll use a specific. Would you say most of you, I mean, I don't know if you even know this, but most of your audience is in relationship or out of relationship or a combination of both?
I would say 60-40 if I had to just make a guesstimation, 60-40 in a relationship as opposed to not.
Okay. Well, I'll give a practice that I think would be really useful. Very simple, by the way, for people that are in a relationship. So and this is just a fun one, right? So every week, get together, get a piece of paper each and a pen each, or your journal, whatever it may be, and write something. You're going to do two things. You're going to write something that week you needed that you didn't get from your partner. And the second thing you're going to write is something that your partner did just in their being, not necessarily for you, that was really, really valuable to you and that you noticed, that you want to commend them on. And then give each other so you can read each other's responses. And then have a conversation, particularly about the first one, but have a conversation about that. This is just a way to grow together, essentially, in very, very simple way. And again, honest, transparent, simple, no judgment. Spend 10 minutes or so writing. Spend as much time as you want talking about what you've just shared, and then build every week. Just keep building.
Man, that's so good. And that's once a week you recommend?
Yeah, do it once a month if once a week is too much. And once a week may be too much. Do it once a month. Like my thing is find your own tempo. Maybe it's every 2 weeks. Create your own tempo with your lifestyle. That's important too.
You know, it's so interesting. I mean, I love that, but I always often talk about when it comes to relationships about how much we work on, if we're in a business partnership, I don't know about you, but I have a couple of businesses that I'm a partner in, and, we work so much, we meet, we do these exercises, we talk about performance and quality control and like what we need to improve. But yet with our relationships, it's unbelievably outrageous how many couples out there don't meet and work on their relationships as though it's a business partnership, because in a way it is, right? That can obviously be taken too far, but I mean, it's crazy. Yeah, Stef, tell us a little bit about what you want our audience to do, what they can check out. How can they gain more value from Stef?
Yeah, thanks, man. So you can follow me on Instagram at Stefanos Sifandos, or Facebook, or whatever you're, Twitter, same thing. TikTok at Stefanos Sifandos. My website, stefanosifandos.com. And, every month here in Austin live, my wife and I run a breathwork for the feminine event. It's a 3-hour somatic immersive. It's live in person in Austin, and it's also live streamed and recorded if you can't make it in physical person. In November, we had, just earlier this month, we had a touch over 300 women that were in attendance virtually all over the world and in person. And it's a really beautiful event. And this was born from a program that Christine and I created about 3.5 years ago called Be the Queen. And I just noticed that the necessity of getting women together in this space where they can somatically release together in sisterhood and in strength and in union and really share. And it's not just breath work. We go through relationship practices as well. There's Q&A, there's live coaching. It's just a really beautiful, immersive every month here in Austin.
Oh man, that's beautiful. Guys, take advantage of that. And go visit Stef's pages. Your social media content is really, really informative and really inspiring. So thank you for the work you do. And thanks for blessing us with your time today, Stef.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate you.
Okay, my friends, I hope you enjoyed that episode as much as I did. That was really cool to speak with him. He is an absolute legend, like I said. And guys, if you enjoyed this as much as I did, send this to a friend. That's how this podcast is going to grow. That's how we get our message out there. That's how we accomplish mental wealth, getting that out there into society as much as possible. And, you'd be doing a great service to people to expose people to Sifandos' work and the Mental Wealth Podcast in general. So send it to anyone that you feel might need it. And guys, thank you for being here today. Love you guys so much. Thank you for all your support. We would not be here doing what we're doing, having people like Sifandos on, if it wasn't for your support. So thank you from the bottom of my heart, and love you guys, and we will see you next week.